Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel. In this video, we'll be talking about the difference between simple interest and compound interest. And then we'll talk about compound interest compounding annually and then the compound interest compounded semi-annually. Finally, we'll list out all the formulas that you need to learn to calculate simple interest and compound interest. So we'll start with a simple example. Let's say you have certain money in your bank, right? You put $1,000 into your bank, which is our principal amount. And then the bank is paying you the rate of, let's say, 10%. And you put this money in the bank for 2 years. Now, how much interest are you going to get at the end of 2 years, right? So there are two cases. Let's look at both cases separately. So in the first case, let's say you get 10% at the end of first year, right? So the interest at the end of first year is going to be equal to 10% of $1,000, right? So it's going to be 10 divided by 100 times 1,000. So you cancel these two zeros and these two zeros, and you get 10 times 10 is 100, right? So you get $100 at the end of first year. And let's say now you took this $100 out of your bank, right? That's your interest. You took this out and invested somewhere else, or you spend that money to buy something for yourself. Now, at the end of second year, right? Again, you still have $1,000 in your bank, and the bank is again going to pay you interest on that $1,000. So on the second year, again, the bank is going to pay you some interest, and that interest is again going to be $100 because it's 10% on the $1,000 that you have put in your bank. So it's again going to be $100, right? So at the end of 2 years, how much interest did you get in total? So the total interest that you got at the end of 2 years is $100 plus $100, which is going to be $200, right? So you get $200 on your $1,000 that you put in your bank, which is our first case. Now let's look at our second case, okay? In the second case, again, you get in the first year the same amount of interest that you got as in our first case. So you get 10% out of your $1,000, right? Which is going to be $100. So this is your interest at the end of your first year, but you put the money in the bank for 2 years. But the difference in our second case is, let's say you did not take out this $100 to spend on something. This $100 is still in your bank. So what's going to happen in your second year is you get your $100 as your interest in your second year as well, right? For your $1,000. But this $100 is still in your bank. So the bank is liable to pay you interest on this $100 as well. So the bank is going to pay you 10% interest on this $100 as well, which is going to be 10% is 10 divided by 100 out of $100. So we can cancel these 200, right? And you get $10 interest on your $100 interest that had been accumulated at the end of your first year. So the difference here is you get $100 interest at the end of your second year for your $1,000 that you initially put in your bank, plus you get this extra $10 interest at the end of second year because your $100 that you got at the end of first year is still there in the bank. So the total interest that you get at the end of second year is $100 plus $10, which is going to be $110. And in this way, the total interest that you get at the end of 2 years is $100 in the first year and $110 in the second year, which is going to be total $210. So this is different from our $200 in the first case because you get $10 more interest in your second case. The reason for this extra interest in the second case is that the $100 that you got at the end of first year is still in your bank, and the bank is paying you interest on the interest that you got in your first year. Now these two cases show us the difference between the simple interest and the compound interest. This first case is a case of simple interest, okay? And the second case that we just learned over here is the case of compound interest. So in case of simple interest, you get paid your interest on the $1,000 that you initially put in your bank, which means you are taking out the interest every year, Whereas in our second case, what's happening is you are not taking out your interest. So the bank is paying you interest on the interest accumulated in your bank. So in case of compound interest, you are getting more interest than in case of simple interest. In this particular example, we are getting $10 more in case of compound interest than in our simple interest. So in this way, our simple interest and compound interest is different. Again, in case of simple interest, you get paid interest only on your $1,000, okay? So you don't get paid interest on your interest at the end of first year because you take out that money. Whereas in case of compound interest, you get paid interest also on your interest accumulated at the end of first year. So you get more and more interest in the next year and the next year and so on. Now that we know the difference between simple interest and compound interest, let's look at the difference between compound interest compounded annually and compound interest compounded semi-annually. So what's the difference between compound interest compounded annually and compound interest compounded semi-annually? Again, let's look at a similar example as above. Let's say you put a money in the bank, right? Let's say you put $1,000. And again, let's say the bank is paying you the interest at the rate of 10%. And the time that you put the money is just for 1 year, let's say. Now, what compound interest compounded annually and compounded semi-annually means is that in case of compounded annually, the bank pays you interest only at the end of 1 year, okay? Whereas in case of compound interest compounded semi-annually, the bank pays you interest every 6 months. Or you could say every half year, right? So half year is actually 6 months, so it's the same thing. So in case of semi-annually, you get paid interest every 6 months, whereas in case of annually, you get paid interest only after 1 year. Now, in this example, if you look at compound interest compounded annually, you get paid interest at the end of 1 year, which is going to be 10% of $1,000, right? And we already calculated that to be $100. So you get $100 at the end of first year, which is your compound interest compounded annually. Now, in the case of compound interest compounded semi-annually, the bank is supposed to pay you $100, right, at 10% at the end of 1 year. But since the bank is paying interest every 6 months, you are going to get $50 at the end of 6 months, okay? So that in the next 6 months, you get another $50 and the total will be $100. Now, the benefit in this case is this $50 that you got at the end of your 6 months is still going to be in your bank. And the bank is supposed to pay interest also on this $50 for the next 6 months. So, for the next 6 months, the bank needs to pay 10% interest on your $50. So, 10% on $50 is going to be $5. But it's not a 1 year that you're putting this money in your bank, right? It's just 6 months. So the bank is only going to pay you half of $5, which is going to be $2.5, right? So you're getting $2.5 extra interest on this $50 that you earned at the end of 6 months. So in this way, the bank is supposed to pay you $50 at the end of next 6 months for your $1,000, which is in your bank. And the bank is also liable to pay you $2.5 interest on the $50 interest that you got at the end of 6 months. So at the end of the last 6 months, you are going to get $50 for your $1,000 and then extra $2.5 for the $50 that you got at the end of your previous 6 months. So the total interest that you get at the end of the last 6 months is going to be $52.5, okay? So if you add this $50 that you got in the first 6 months and the $52.5 that you got at the last 6 months, the total interest that you got at the end of 1 year is going to be 50 plus 52.5, $102.5. So in this way, you are getting $2.5 more interest in case of compound interest compounded semi-annually than compound interest compounded annually. So what's the difference between compound interest compounded annually and semi-annually? It's just that in case of semi-annually, you get paid interest every 6 months, due to which you can get more interest on your interest that you get paid on 6 months. Whereas in case of compounded annually, you need to wait 1 year to get your interest, and only after 1 year you get interest on your interest. So it's more beneficial if you put your money in compound interest compounded semi-annually than compounded annually in your bank account if they are providing you the same rate of interest. Okay, so now that we know the difference between compound interest compounded annually and semi-annually, let's look at all the formulas, okay? The formulas to calculate simple interest, compound interest compounded annually, and compound interest compounded semi-annually. Okay, so first let's look at the formula of simple interest. The formula of simple interest is PTR divided by 100, okay? Sometimes people also just write it as P, T, and small r. The small r means just r divided by 100, so it's the same thing, okay? And the formula to calculate the amount, right, which is the total money that you get from your bank, which includes the money that you put in your bank, which is your principal money, and the interest that you get from your bank is principal plus interest, okay? It's pretty simple. Principal is the money that you put in your bank, and the interest is the extra money that the bank gives you for the money that you put in your bank, right? If you add those two monies, you get the total amount that the bank is going to pay you, okay? And then we can also modify this formula a little bit. So we have principal as P plus our interest is PTR divided by 100, right? So when we take P as common, we get 1 plus TR divided by 100 and bracket close. So sometimes we can also use this formula, and this is the simplest formula for calculating the amount. And that's our simple interest. Now for our compound interest, we have two cases, right? So the first case is compounded annually, and the second case is compounded semi-annually. So in case of compound interest compounded annually, we can calculate the compound interest by using the formula P, big bracket, small bracket, 1 plus R divided by 100, bracket close, power T minus 1, and then big bracket close. And we can find the compound amount by using the formula. So you just remove this big bracket and this 1. So you get P small bracket 1 plus R divided by 100, bracket close, power T, okay? Now in case of compound interest compounded semi-annually, we have a similar formula for compound interest and compound amount. So in case of compound interest, we have P, right? Again, big bracket, and then we have 1 plus R, right? Divided by, instead of 100, we are going to write 200 over here and bracket close. And then instead of T, we are going to write 2T, okay? So we are adding 2 over here and then over here. And then we have minus 1 over here and bracket close. Similarly, for compound amount, we can have a similar formula. So we have P, and then we remove that big bracket and minus 1, and we get 1 plus R divided by 200, bracket close, 2T, okay? So in case of semi-annually, we just add 2 over here as well as here, okay? So we have 2T and 200. And that's it. That's the formula for compound interest compounded annually and compound interest compounded semi-annually, okay? Here I made a small mistake, okay? There are 2 N's in annually, not just 1 N. So in this way, these are the formulas to calculate compound interest compounded annually and semi-annually. Similarly, this is the formula to calculate the simple interest. So I hope this video was helpful to you. If you liked our video, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for future maths videos. Thank you.